This is an old Insley Dragline crane. It has some kind of a huge 6-cylinder flathead engine. All of the control levers are frozen. Wah, wah, wah. Hey, there we go. Boom. Well, I'm back with the old Insley Dragline crane. I have no idea why you guys like this thing so much, but you obviously do, so I'm prepared to milk a few more videos out of it. Last time we got the engine running, and it runs okay-ish. It sounds pretty good at low RPMs, you know, at idle, but as soon as you raise the RPMs, it starts to drop out on at least one cylinder, possibly 2 cylinders. And if you leave the RPMs up, it sometimes kind of drops in. You can hear it. It kind of has this little chuffing sound where the cylinder sounds like it's trying to catch. And to me that sounds like a valve issue. So I suspect what we're going to find is it has a valve that's hanging up, and at at low RPMs it's able to open and close more or less correctly, but at higher RPMs the valve can't react fast enough and it's kind of hanging up, or possibly it's stuck completely open. And also, if you cup your hand over the end of the carburetor, it kind of feels like it has pretty low manifold vacuum. So I brought a proper vacuum gauge this time. We'll take some vacuum readings. But before we do that, I think we'll pull the tappet covers off and have a look at the valves. We'll probably just go ahead and set the valves while we're in there. It's pretty easy to set the valves on these engines. Now this is a flathead engine, so there's no way that the pistons can ever contact the valves. So even if it has a sticky valve, we haven't made the situation any worse by running it. Now a couple of notes about the engine. First off, I figured out what it is. This is a Continental B427. So that's actually a 427 cubic inch flathead inline 6-cylinder engine. It is absolutely massive. And I found a B427 in the random numbers on the tag on the back side, so I know that's what it is. I was pretty sure it was a Continental because that's the only engine I know of where the distributor comes out through the top of the head, but I just wasn't familiar with these larger models. So guys were also saying that it may have had a belt-driven governor. It did have an external governor, but it wasn't belt-driven. I can't show you on camera, but on the back side, actually it's on the front side of this timing cover, there's a plate that they've added, and that's where the governor would have originally bolted up. I have no idea why they took it off. I don't know where it is. It was probably a Pierce governor, and we could probably find one, but I don't think we would ever find one that has the right gear to drive off of that, off the cam gear or whatever's inside there. Maybe it's an idler. Now a lot of guys were asking why the engine wasn't seized up after sitting here for 20 years, and the exhaust has not been covered. It just has that rain cap on it. And what saved this engine is the fact that it's a flathead. So if you're not familiar with a flathead, the exhaust manifold is the top one and the intake manifold is the bottom one, but those ports are in the side of the actual block. So in order for any water to get into the actual cylinders via the manifolds, it would actually have to go into the engine block, up through the valve, across and down into the cylinders, and there's really not a good way for that to happen. Alright, I got the tappet covers off. This side looks okay. This side does not look okay. So we got a busted valve spring here, and that's not a fresh kill. It's been broken for a while, so that's probably part of the reason why they parked it. And it looks like the valves don't seem to be getting much oil. I think there's a part missing. Every L-head Continental I've ever worked on, it has these baffles that go in by the valves here. It's supposed to squirt the oil up onto the valve stems, and those don't appear to be anywhere inside here. So maybe I don't know if they don't all have that. Maybe these big engines don't have those baffle plates, but like the smaller, F-series engines I've worked on, they all have those. Anyway, That's kind of a showstopper. I see the little valve keepers are laying down there in the bottom. I don't know if we can get that spring out of there without pulling the head or not. Kind of sucks. If this is an overhead valve engine, we could just, you know, put a little air in the cylinder and pull that spring right off, but it's a lot more tricky on one of these. Anyway, I think we're kind of done for the day. Well, I don't think it's going to be a problem to change that valve spring without pulling the head. There should be room to kind of jam it up in there. I got the old one off, no problem. The rest of them look like they're okay. So we just need to replace this one. I was trying to figure out if it's an exhaust or an intake valve. I'm still not entirely sure. So it looks like the exhaust manifold has 6 runners. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 1 exhaust runner for each exhaust valve. But the intake manifold only has 4 runners. So I think that means that we're going to have exhaust, intake, intake, exhaust, intake, exhaust. And then the front side's basically just a mirror image of that. So I'm pretty sure this is an exhaust valve. You can see, just based on the amount of crud that's built up over the broken area, it's been broken for a long time. It's not like we caused this to happen by trying to start it up. And I did find both keepers, and we've got the rotor. Well, it's not a rotor, whatever you call this thing. Okay, it's a few days later, and we've got our new valve spring. Looks like it's the right one to me. He said that there's some engines that have both inner and outer valve springs, but this one only has one set. Anyway, this is where I got the parts from Monty's Equipment. They specialize in Continentals. They're in the Chicago area, and they have pretty much anything you would ever need. I bought some parts for that F245 that I rebuilt from these guys. They have all the weird gaskets and, you know, head bolts and stuff for these engines. So Gerard up there, he also told me that he doesn't think that these 427 engines had the baffles behind the tappet covers. So I'm not sure. I guess the valves just are splash lubricated or something. Anyway, he said not to worry about that. One other thing I found while I was poking around, this is the distributor cap. And it looks great on the inside. There's hardly any wear on the posts, but this button, I can't make it do it right now. There it goes. See how it wants to stick? They call it a button, but it's basically just a brush. It's like a carbon brush. And yeah, I don't like that. So I'll see if I can get it freed up, but if we aren't happy with it, I'll just go ahead and replace the cap and rotor. There we go. Just like that. Hopefully I can do this without losing a finger. Well, now I did it. Shoot. Is that it? doesn't seem quite right. Well, I don't know if you guys can see it on the camera, but these keepers are wrong. Something's wrong with them. I think this one maybe is worn. The shoulder is worn on the inside. Possibly from running for so long with that valve spring broken. So it's on there, and I don't think it can come off, but that's not right. It should sit up inside of this bottom cup. So I guess I'll have to find out what the valve stem diameter is and see if I can eBay some used valve keepers for that. I mean, I think we can run it for a while like that, but it definitely needs to be fixed. Never seen one do that before. Alright, to set the valves, we're going to put cylinder number 1, we're going to bar it over until we get valve overlap. So that's the exhaust valve opening now. And when it closes, oh, come on, man, this thing's hard to bar over. You should see the intake valve start to open. There it is, right there. So that is valve overlap. It has to do with exhaust gas scavenging, but basically, for a split second, the intake and exhaust valves are both slightly open. So, cylinder number 1 is currently in valve overlap. Alright, so cylinder number 1 is in valve overlap. That means we're going to set both valves on cylinder number 6. It's 17 thousandths on the intake, 22 on the exhaust, and you can see they're pretty loose. So that's actually good. Better too much gap than too little gap. Too little gap is what causes us to have, burned up valves, because it's holding the valve slightly open all the time. Anyway, I'm going to set these valves, and then we're going to bar the engine over until cylinder number 5 goes into valve overlap. This is a straight 6, so our firing order is 1 5 3 6 2 4. So we'll just keep going through the firing order. We should have cylinder number 5 come into valve overlap. And when cylinder number 5, that's this one right here, goes into valve overlap, we're going to set the valves on cylinder number 2. So it's really easy on a straight 6 because it has companion cylinders. So 1 and 6, 2 and 5, 3 and 4 are companion cylinders. So that means with cylinder number 1 being in valve overlap, it's the end of its exhaust stroke and the beginning of its intake stroke. That means it's on top dead center. That means that cylinder number 6, the companion cylinder, is on top dead center of its compression stroke. And on the compression stroke, the valves had to be closed. So that's the best way to know that the valves are truly closed, is to get your cylinder onto top dead center of a compression stroke. But like I said, companion cylinders. So anyway, I've got another video about how to do this on another Continental. It's exactly the same procedure, very simple. So it looks like the mechanical advance is free. See, I can turn this little post with the cam. So that's all it really needs to be able to do. I'm going to go ahead and replace the cap and rotor. I just don't trust that old one. So I marked my old cap with the number 1 position. So where's my lead here? Now, I did get new wires too, but I really don't see anything wrong with these. So 1, 5, 3, 6, 2, 3, 4 and the coil. Oh boy, that doesn't like to go in there, does it? Alright, I stole a coil wire off of the old end loader over there. I don't think she's going anywhere. Well, I've done a few things before I fired up the camera. I did have to break down and actually buy some parts. That's a new lower radiator hose. It had this crusty old disaster on there. So they had a universal hose on it. I just put another universal hose on it. And then I've also taken a stab at resoldering this radiator. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not the world's greatest solderer, obviously, but I'm concerned that it may also be leaking at the bottom. So I've just got water in it for right now. Probably what I'll do is I'll just drain it at the end of the day every day, and we'll just let her leak a little bit. Well, I went ahead and jury-rigged a better fuel tank. This is just an old lawnmower tank. It kind of had a weird shape, so I built this wooden box, and it's got one of those cheap clicky-clacky pumps on the top. I just got it wired right up to the battery. Seems to work. If you want to build one of these for yourself, all you need to do is find an old fuel tank and then jump on eBay and type in cheapest fuel pump ever made ever, and then find the one that has the 1/4-inch fittings, and you're all set. Well, I ran into a bit of a snag. Went to go fill the radiator up with water. She ain't water no more. Guess we'll have to wait till it warms up. Well, that certainly sounds better. Much better. I think it's pretty hard to complain about that. Sounds like it might have a little bit of a skip at idle. Possibly that's an ignition issue. We can go ahead and throw those plugs and wires on it and see if it helps, but I don't think we're going to get a whole lot better than that. It's hard to tell because of this short little exhaust pipe. It kind of makes it sound erratic. But yeah, it takes throttle, runs good. Boy, it really needs a governor. That is super sketchy the way they've got it set up. So I talked to the guys at Monty's. He thinks he might have a governor for it. Okay, I think we're going to quit while we're ahead with the engine. I'm not going to bother with the timing or anything else. I thought this was a manifold vacuum port right here, but I took that bolt out and it's actually not drilled all the way through. Now there's a big 1/2-inch pipe plug up here, which I'm pretty sure is manifold vacuum, but I don't have an adapter for my vacuum gauge that's big enough to jam down into that hole. So just sticking your hand over the end of the carburetor, this thing's got massive amounts of manifold vacuum, and you might have been able to see the throttle body here actually gets like ice crystals on it. So we know she's pulling, and I think our accelerator pump is working. It seems to take throttle okay, so we'll just leave it for now. Let's see, the thermostat is opening. I've been running it with the radiator cap off just because I'm not sure I really trust my radiator patch job there. But I think we'll go ahead and throw the cap back on. I don't see any leaks. And like I said before, I've just been filling it with straight water, and then I rigged up a hose here so I can just drain it back into that bucket at the end of the day. We don't want to leave water in it overnight. It's getting pretty cold this time of the year. Anyway, let's move on to the controls. So I'll give you guys a little bit of a walkthrough of how it works. And a huge thanks to Mr. 73 Diamond Rio. I will link again to his channel in the description box. Great guy. He actually made a whole section of a video for me about how the controls work in his Insley shovel. I was very unsure before that about how the thing actually was supposed to work, and I really appreciate that. So we'll start right here at the engine. Right behind the flywheel is a huge twin disc snap over clutch, and that basically is going to send power to all the controls up in the front. Now behind that clutch is, I believe, a chain inside of this big case, and the chain runs a small sprocket here on the engine side, huge sprocket up there. Okay, so power's coming out the clutch through this chain, and then it comes into a giant gear reduction right here. So underneath this cover there's a huge bowl gear that's driven off of a small gear from the end of the chain, and then down below there is a second gear that drives another shaft that runs, maybe you can see it, kind of close to the floor down there. Now this first shaft right here runs the two main winches. So this is going to be for your drag of your bucket and up and down of your bucket. So this is the other end of those two shafts. So there's the big shaft that runs through the two main winches. Here's the second shaft that runs down closer to the floor. This clutch right here powers this chain, and that is for the boom hoist. And you can see maybe back there, it's actually got a big, like a ratchet pawl on it. And as far as I know, all of the winches on this machine are basically free spool all the time. So you have a clutch and you have a brake for each function, and basically as soon as you release the clutch, she's free to go. You have to use the brakes to actually control it. So here's the clutch for the main winch, or one of the main winches. So it's got this little booster right here. When that band tightens up, it's going to engage this large clutch inside of the drum, and then it's got a band brake on the outside. Now I've gone through and checked. As far as I can tell, all the clutches are free. There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clutches. They're all basically free inside of their bores. However, the brakes are a different story. I believe the brakes on both winches are frozen on, but we don't need the winches right now. So on this second shaft, there's the clutch here for the boom hoist. Then there's a clutch here and a symmetrical clutch on the opposite side, and they each run onto a bevel gear. And one clutch is to swing one way, one clutch is to swing the other way, or to track forward or reverse. So the bevel gears is how they get the the change of direction. There's a better look at that big bevel gear inside. I'll give you a rundown of what the levers do, at least as far as I understand it. So these two levers here are for your two main winches, and these two brake pedals right here are the brakes for your two main winches. So you have a clutch and a brake for each winch. This lever right here that's currently forward, that's the main clutch. That's that big twin disc unit that's on the back of the flywheel. So that just snaps over, and then once it's on, you don't really have to mess with that. This lever right here is for the boom hoist. This lever right here is for your swing, left and right, and then it also does your track forward and backward. These two levers right here are the clutches and brakes for the tracks. So you have a left and a right, and basically you pull that back, it releases a dog clutch, and then if you pull it a little further, it should engage a brake. This lever right here switches the machine from being able to swing to being able to track. So you cannot swing and track at the same time. So it's got three positions. I believe it's in track right now. Then there's a neutral, you pull it back, and then that would be swing. This lever down here at the bottom is a swing lock. So you pull that up, and it basically pulls it removes a ratchet pawl from the main swing gear underneath of the machine. Now we can talk about the problems I've found. So all these levers are pretty stiff. The only one that really seems to work is the main clutch lever. That one seems to be fine. The swing clutches seem to be seized up. They don't seem to want to do anything, so we'll have to work on that. These two winch clutches, they seem to sort of work, but the brakes are completely frozen. The swing and track selector here, that doesn't seem to do anything. Also, the swing lock is completely seized. Now I noticed that this large gear here, it actually sits kind of vertically on the top of the floor of the house here. It's completely shot. See, it's actually worn so bad it looks like a sprocket. There's very little left of those teeth. Now another big problem, these are the yokes for the steering clutches. So you see right here, this thing, if I pull this lever, maybe, come on. See how that goes up and down? Well, there should be another one on that threaded piece that sticks up on the top, and it should go into this rear yoke back here. But you see it's completely missing. It looks like somebody actually took that apart, took the pieces off, and then never bothered to fix it. So if we can get the thing to track, we're only going to be able to steer using one side. Well, hindsight being 2020, I probably should have cleared the trees out first. There's still one good size, I think it's a poplar here, and I'm gonna have to have some help to get that one down. It's pretty much straight up and down. It's a pretty good sized tree. So I think if we get two guys, one on a saw and one in the machine swinging the boom over, we can just use the crane boom to push that tree right over. I wish we could drive it out of there, but I think it's going to need a little bit of a nudge. The tracks seem to be frozen, but it's pretty cool we got it to swing. Alright guys, I think that's enough for today. I'm tired and we're losing light. I can't really do much until we get the rest of this stuff out of here anyway, which will require us to get this machine running. That may be a video in and of itself. This is a Clark all-terrain forklift. It's got a little John Deere diesel engine in it, and this is actually a pretty good machine. It's the best thing down here by a significant margin, but it hasn't run for, I don't know, probably at least 6 years, something like that. So we've played around with it a little bit. It got to where it wouldn't crank over very well, and I found a bad connection from the ground cable to the frame, fixed that, and then it wouldn't get any fuel to the injectors, and I found that the metering valve was stuck, and I fixed that, but I still can't get it running. So I need some help to bleed out the injectors properly. It's kind of a two-man job on this machine. So hopefully once we get the stuff cleared out of the way, we can kind of nudge the tracks a little bit, break them loose, and then see if we can track it out of there. I'm not really sure what we'll do with it once we get it tracking. Maybe we can have a heads-up drag race against DeBoss Garage, but his seems to be in a lot better condition than mine, so I think I would probably lose. Well, I got the house cleaned up pretty good in here, just swept it out. I did find a few artifacts. There's a crusty old pair of ice grips, and then this is some kind of a pivot, I guess. It's got actually got a part number in it. Some remnant of an old casting, and I found two of these old knives, both with the ends busted off of them. And I did find a serial number inscribed on the side of this support. I don't know if you guys can read it, or if you can read it, if it makes any sense or helps anybody identify this machine. So even if the machine has no value, this engine is pretty cool. How often do you see a 427 cubic inch flathead straight six gas? I don't think I've ever seen one before. So even if the rest of the machine gets melted down, we'll save that thing. I don't think it's original anyway, judging by how scabby these brackets and stuff are. I'm guessing it's a, well, I'm sure it's a repower. So I'd say the biggest issues are concentrated right here. The gear that you see there, it's extremely loose on whatever kind of a shaft it runs on. Like I said, we're missing that one yoke. The yoke that switches it from swing to travel, you can see it's popped out of it's kind of popped out of this yoke over here. So that's going to need some attention. I did get that freed up though, so we can switch between swing and track. And then whatever, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the camera. Yeah, whatever this shaft is that's on the center of that large gear, the one that's extremely worn, that's for the swing. It goes down to another small gear to swing the house around. Whatever bearing is inside that thing, or that shaft runs on, is completely nuked, because the whole thing just slops from side to side whenever you reverse direction. So I don't know what's up with that. As far as I can tell, there are no ball bearings or roller bearings anywhere on this machine. Everything is like a bronze bushing and a grease zerk. So probably the bushings are worn out. Well, there should be a cover, I think, that covers this section, and it's missing. That's part of why we have so much trouble with these linkages. Then I found a bunch of crap inside there. There's a big hook assembly, some kind of a big spring, a bunch of random pieces of threaded rod, just, I don't know, stake or picket or whatever it is, and another one of those knives. Alright, a couple of notes from the last video. A lot of guys wanted to argue with me on this carburetor that it does not have an accelerator pump, that the plunger you saw was some kind of a enrichment circuit or a power circuit or a power valve. I don't know what to tell you guys. It is an accelerator pump. It also is a power valve. So when the plunger comes down, it pumps fuel out through the main jet. That's the accelerator pump. And then it also pushes on a valve at the bottom of the bore. That is your power valve. Lets a little bit more fuel come through when it's at full throttle, or at least at low manifold vacuum. So I'll put a link in the description to a PDF copy of the manual for this carburetor. It has a pretty good explanation of how that system works. I also had several people comment that the outside case of the coil needs to be grounded, and that's not true. At least that's not true for any coil that I've ever run into. Inside the coil there's a primary and a secondary winding, but they're both connected to the negative terminal of the coil. So it's, in electrical terms, it's an auto transformer as opposed to an isolation transformer, so it only has 3 connections instead of 4. I also had several people quite upset that I didn't change the oil, replace the filter, fill up the coolant, hone the cylinders, grind the crankshaft, all that stuff before I tried to crank the engine over. They all wanted me to replace all the spark plugs and all the wires and cap and rotor, points and condenser. I don't know what to tell you guys. We're not trying to finish the Dakar rally. We just want to see if it's going to run. And there's really no reason to start winging parts at it. The oil that's in it, it looks fine to me. Even if it has a little bit of gas or water in it, as soon as we get the engine warmed up, it'll cook that stuff right out. It's not nearly enough concentration to ruin the lubrication properties. As far as the coolant goes, it's like 20 degrees Fahrenheit today. We could run this thing for 2 hours without overheating it. Well, I appreciate everybody watching, and I'm not sure when the next video in the series will come out, maybe a few weeks, but I've got some other interesting things to show you guys.